salty ocean, off where the waves roll free. The sparkling water rises, then crashes to the sea. Out amongst the breakers, you'll have no need to fear. It's true, it's the blue frontier.
Welcome to a new episode of Rising Tide the Ocean podcast. This is David Helberg, and my co-host is still Vicki Nichols-Goldstein.
And it's a pleasure to be here.
Today, we're honored to be speaking with Ray Troll, world-famous artist and illustrator of Ketchikan, Alaska, although just now he's summering in Kansas, the site of a former ocean that he really digs, and you can find out more about that on his popular Paleo Nerd Podcast. Right now, I'm paging through my copy of Spawn Till You Die, the thin art of Ray Troll, which is actually a beautifully illustrated 40-year retrospective art book that can also make you laugh. But before we get any further into Ray and his art, it's time for Blue News You Can Use. So, Vicki, have you heard about these orcas sinking yachts in the Mediterranean?
Yeah, it's wild, and it's been going on for a number of years. They sank a 35-foot yacht in mid-May. Yeah,
so that was, I guess, the point at which Portugal and Spain convened all these orca experts, and they just put out a report. And you know the conclusions? Yes,
it's insane. It's bored teenage boy orcas.
Yeah, they're juvenile delinquents. And
in a way, it's kind of good, though, because these orcas are bored because they're not out there hunting so diligently looking for the bluefin tuna, because the bluefin tuna population is increasing. So
more bluefin and less work to catch him, but they're bored and playing with boats. And where's grandma? I thought this was supposed to be a matrilineal society.
Yeah, where are the grown-ups in this pod? That's a good question.
That's the scenario those scientists have to scratch their heads over. But anyway, Ray.
Yeah.
I'd like to try and summarize your oeuvre. I'd say it's kind of like Gary Larson meets Winslow Homer.
That's interesting. Oeuvre. It's a lovely word, too. So, yeah, summarize me. Let's hear what you got to say about me.
Now, before I summarize you, let's do what we do in every show, which is start with your ocean origins. Where in Corning, New York or Wichita, Kansas did you first connect with the ocean?
Well, my origin story, our whole origin story, as you know, starts in the ocean, but because we all came from the ocean. But my personal journey is Air Force brat, born in Corning, New York. And my father was a career Air Force guy, and then went to law school, became a lawyer in the Air Force. But I moved and lived in 10 different places, went from Corning, New York to Japan, and then from Japan to Alabama, then from Alabama to Pennsylvania, then from Pennsylvania to Puerto Rico. And that's where the ocean connection. We lived right across the street, down the cliff over, the Caribbean. And that was my playground from 10 years old to 13 years old. And anyways, the story then takes us to Virginia, then to Kansas, where I went to high school and art college, got my art degree here. And then eventually...
Were you missing Kansas, the beach in Puerto Rico all this time?
Yeah, I think the fish thing really did start for me there. And I just really remember some salient moments, being a troubled young teenager down there, and the solace was the beach. The whole thing really turned for me when I moved to Alaska in 1983. I'm from a family of 6 kids, and 4 of the 6 kids made Alaska their home. And it was a sibling thing. I had 2 art degrees in my back pocket. My sister Kate said, "Why don't you come to Alaska?" I had an MFA at that time, and I had taught a little bit, but I had nothing going on. And I went and sold fish for the summer of 1983 in a seafood shack on the dock in Ketchikan, and the fish became my muse. So
that sounds like a logical progression from a master of fine arts to selling fish. Had you thought of Alaska before 1983?
Well, it had been slowly, as the older trolls, it's the 4 older troll kids that ended up in Alaska, and it was kind of one at a time. I came up, I did not know a humpy from a hole in the ground, did not know my salmon species, but there I was with 2 art degrees selling fish, and I soon began to just study the fish and tumbled into the world of fish.
The world of fish. Well, we know you're an amazing artist, and we're going to talk more about that. But I want to talk with you about your music. And I love I love your statement that everybody should be in a band, regardless of talent or ambition. And I've seen videos of your band and listened to it, the Ratfish Wranglers.
We wrangle ratfish.
And I love the Ratfish rule. So where does this
got to be quite a tale
love come from? Like, tell us about that.
Music or ratfish or both?
Both. It's very well connected, I see.
I love rock and roll. I love music, and I'm alone in the studio. I mean, drawing and painting was my childhood superpower, but being in that big raucous family, when I finally would be on my own, be drawing pictures. But I always am listening to music. So when I'm on my own, especially in the studio, I like to be there by myself. I'm just listening to music, consuming music. And when I was in high school, junior high school, I wanted to be in a band, and so, yeah, I formed a band. I learned I haven't gone very far in the old music world, but I know my 3-4 chords, but it's just so much fun. But I guess what I'm trying to say with being a band is that it's a great collaborative experience being a creative group, and you learn how to interact with other creatives, and together you hone a sound. And when I moved to Alaska, I kind of started a garage band. I had garage bands previously in college, and reached out to some fellow musicians and began to write songs. And since fish were my muse, I began to write songs about fish and about evolution and science. And so it really is kind of science rock and roll. And actually, when you go to a Ratfish Wrangler concert, you will end up actually learning something. We'll sing about lump suckers and ratfish.
So why do you love ratfish?
Well, they're just so freaking weird. I was drawn to
they
them.
Are.
And one of the things was when I moved to Alaska and I was in the middle of this fish culture, I was selling fish, I was drawing and painting fish. Simultaneously, the cruise ship industry is beginning to expand, but I also started fishing seriously as a sports fisherman. And then a lot of my neighbors were commercial fishermen, but I began to sports fish. And there's just so many aspects to the fishing, the maritime cultures. But when I began to catch the fish and get my fish ID books out, wanting to learn, I'm just naturally curious. What is this? And I love bottom fishing, which is really like reaching out into the mysterious, dark unknown. And you just drop your line to the bottom, see what comes up. And there'd be these massive halibut, beautiful rockfish that blow your mind. And I just wanted to know more about these creatures. And then one of the weirdest, most alien looking was a ratfish. And I love the name ratfish because it sounds like rat fink. As a kid, I loved rat fink, sort of the un-Mickey Mouse, the anti-Mickey Mouse. Because I'm naturally curious, I wanted to know more about these animals and these fish. So catching a fish was always and is always an emotional experience. And it's mixed with pride. And it's also mixed with horror at killing a beautiful animal. And that was feeding my art, that angst, that sort of conflict of emotions and stuff, the pride and the horror. And then also beginning to learn, letting these things go, but also just being fascinated. And I began to tumble into the science of the fish. And so because I wanted to learn more about these subjects that were engulfing my life, that's when I really began kind of collaborating with scientists. And I reached out, I just got on the phone, and there's only a few people in the world that know about chimeras, which are ratfish, and they're cartilaginous fish. They're in the shark family. I reached out to Dominique Didier, who was at the Academy of Natural Sciences, Philadelphia, just called her out of the blue back in the old rotary dial phone. Hey, you want to talk about ratfish? And she turned me on to all kinds of things about ratfish, started drawing and painting them. I tumbled deeper into the world of ratfish and how ancient they are.
So you tumbled into ratfish and you came out with king salmon. I'm kind of curious about that early phase. You've just arrived, you're filleting fish at the market. Are you still doing your art? And at that point, before you start going out and catching fish, is your art separate, different topics, different images than fishes of the world?
I was kind of looking for, still trying out my style or trying to, come up with my own original take on things. And was just open to whatever. And when I landed there in '83, and like I said, I was engulfed in that culture, but also I did actually work on the slime line, as they called it. I sold fish in the summer, and I liked Alaska. It was just inspiring. And it inspired my siblings too. The wilderness, the ocean, blocks away from me in this ocean world. But working on the slime line, my studio was actually at the cannery upstairs, because I was shameless opportunist. Like, oh, wait, there's a space upstairs. In the winter, they're not using it. Do you mind if I just have a studio up there on the water? But also the fish line is going downstairs. And so I would go down and literally grab a salmon, drag it up, or salmon heads, and put them on the table next to me and draw them. Literally immersed myself into this culture. It was just endlessly inspiring. My creative brain was on fire.
I have to say, I mean, a lot of people enjoy the humor in your art, but you have some pieces like the Kingfisher, the Raven, and the Half Moon Run, or Eagle Bait, or even Alaska Preserve the Balance, that almost spiritual. They are spiritual. They're spirit of wildness.
Thanks. That's nice of you to say, David. And I am all over the board. I do high art, lowbrow art, middle art, humorous stuff, but my job is making images that people can relate to and that engage me. And I like to make deeper images that literally have layers to them, or maybe just try to convey an emotion. A lot of times there is maybe some complicated science behind stuff, but I love surrealism. My work has been described as scientific surrealism, and I think it's a really nice blend of the two, because surrealism doesn't make sense, but it speaks to you on some dreamlike, intuitive level, and then the science is in there too. And I like to just connect and sometimes I don't know what they mean myself, and that's the mystery of creative life too, you know.
And when I was up in Alaska many years ago, as I mentioned earlier, I discovered your art a couple decades ago and have a lot of pieces. And so I'm really curious, you're talking about the spiritual side, the science. Has this become an issue with any particular groups where you're trying to merge science, mythic creatures, historic creatures, or has it just been good loving with all of the folks out there?
Well, it's a blur, and I try to know which lane I'm in. So if I'm in the art lane and I'm blending these things, yeah, it's been kind of a tricky balance in a way, but I think people get it. I have a Shark alphabet book, for instance, and I think it's interesting that the art that I produce for that has really got surreal aspects to it, but it's for kids. It's teaching stuff to kids. But I drew a whale shark, and I wanted to make the point that it's really big. So I have it floating above a school bus, you know, so it's hovering above a school bus. And a kid would think literally like sharks don't fly, but they get it, you know, and it's a mixture of those two. But just a whale shark is as big as a school bus. Just draw it with a school bus, you'll get it. But yeah, I've done you mentioned Kirk before we started recording, and Kirk Johnson is now at the Smithsonian. He's a paleobotanist. He's the director of the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. We've done 3 books together. We're working on a 4th. Having my dreamlike imagery and sometimes my just absurd stuff mixed in with solid science, you know, like I said, it's a balance. And every now and then I will snap into focus and just do as close a rendition as I can of a Jurassic scene or something like that without getting goofy. But then off I go again. So
it's so varied. I love it.
Yeah, it is varied. So
how quickly did you realize that you could afford to move off the slime line? Did your art start to take off?
I'm not terribly aware. Things just kind of stumble along. But I was lucky enough that my undergrad art degree was in printmaking. And so I knew how to print, you know, so I knew how to do woodcuts and etchings, but I also learned how to silkscreen and do graphic images. And I really like drawing and painting, graphic arts a lot. But I knew how to make T-shirts. And T-shirts became my medium. And I like to think of them as every man's art. We wear it, you know.
Did you start with silkscreen then, or did you go right to lithograph and printing? Well,
silkscreening T-shirts. I started a line of T-shirts. I did I just did them for a kind of a fun fish festival in Ketchikan in 1984. Printed up a bunch of shirts by myself. I had a friend help me, but printed them one fish at a time, covered these shirts, and it had said, "Let's spawn." And it was covered with salmon. And so it was kind of this joke about salmon. In Alaska for the halibut, they were labor intensive, but boom, they sold within 2 days. It's like, wow, I'm onto something. And
yeah, I have
so
one.
Eventually, you maybe have one of those. And I have sold a few million T-shirts over the years now. And it was really the T-shirts that gave me the freedom to work at book projects and geek out on the science. And the books have been good to me, and the exhibits have, but the T-shirts in the end pay the bills. Sometimes they're just silly, and a lot of times they are. But there's some depth to them.
So as another ocean person, when I look at your works like Salvador Dali, Varden, Blues in the Sea of Sea, Empire Strikes Bass, Octopi, Wall Street, the thin line between love and bait, is it just not possible not to make fish puns?
Yeah, it's they don't call it punishment for nothing. It's like a chorus in a song. Right. So it is like a band thing again. Everybody knows can't get no satisfaction. Right. Boom. There it is. Just a phrase. So it's marrying phrases and images that I like to do. And then also ones that might maybe pique your interest a little bit. Out of the ooze and board a cruise. And it's a picture of a lobe-finned fish, one of our ancestral fish. Because in the end, if you get into fish, it is the journey that you make when you realize that you actually are a fish. That's mind-blowing because you are a fish.
So one of your reviewers said that you bring a street attitude to ichthyology and paleontology. So you're a gangsta. But when did you start moving from, let's say, the living and endangered fish of today to the fish of hundreds of millions of years ago?
Well, actually, that journey started at age 4 when I drew a dinosaur, and so with the crayon. So I'm 70 years old now, and I'm still drawing dinosaurs with crayons. So I haven't gone very far in life, but if you're interested in the natural world and the ocean, and you just want to go deeper into the topic, you can't understand the world today unless you know where it all came from, and you don't know what a starfish is, or an echinoderm is, or an octopus is, and how we're related to that. And I really do think that getting people hip to evolution, and there's resistance to that still to this day, that we're actually are animals and part of the natural world. You need to know what you are and where you came from. So I think that's kind of a mission of mine too. So
I know there's a lot of issues in Alaska that are very environmentally oriented. Are there some other issues more nationally that you are thinking about and you might be working on with your art?
Once upon a time, I was much more engaged head on politically. And when I was doing T-shirts like Ancient Forest Forever, now it's maybe a little bit more subtle. Only One Ocean is one of the T-shirts that's in the line right now, but it's our origin, our life, our breath. I just realized, and I was on conservation boards and fighting the fight, going to testify at hearings. And I realized I didn't really have the stomach for it. And I would get very upset and get angry and have to calm down. But I'm too sensitive. So I really realized that if I'm in the studio creating art that maybe isn't so confrontational, that is more maybe inspiring. So if I can get you to care about Pacific spiny lumpsuckers or take a minute to be fascinated by how cool a jellyfish is, then I think I'm doing my job. And I'm also fulfilling myself as my need to make art. Or if I can get you fascinated, I'm working on right now a big fossil map atlas with Kirk Johnson for the entire United States. And we're doing fossils from everywhere in the United States, and I'm placing them on the map. But if I can get you thinking about our ancient origins, the more time we spend in the world being fascinated with things, the less time we are spent fighting. And if you're fostering that fascination, if I'm getting you interested in something, then you begin to care about it. I've done my job to get you engaged with it.
So what will the one ocean look like? I mean, given the fact that even a lot of environmentalists still think the environment ends at the edge of the shore. I mean, there's this sort of incredible ignorance of our ocean world. Like our friend Weiland, who we've interviewed on the show also, he puts up whale murals all over the world. Do you have a singular piece or series that is going to...
Well, I was referring to a T-shirt that's in the line right now, Only One Ocean, and it's a pair of hands at the center. And I originally did it for NOAA. It's a pair of hands holding a rockfish, which are basically threatened all up and down the West Coast, But around that are these concentric circles with all the different eco layers in the ocean, the shoreline and then the deeper ocean. So it's just that image, boom, in the center of a shirt with those phrases around it. The idea, that's our origin, it's our life, it's our breath. Every other breath you take is from the ocean.
I know, it's mind-boggling. People say, wait a minute, what about the forest? And I'm like, that counts too, but don't forget the ocean. But I want to go back to what you were talking about for a moment with the map that you're working on. And so I'm sitting here thinking, I live in Boulder, Colorado, and I have ancient sand and I have ancient clams in my backyard. And I'm really interested with you and Kurt with how you're doing the mapping and what that project looks like. Can you take us through the vision of that?
Well, I am in Kansas right now, but I like to joke. I'm actually looking at ancient oceanfront right now because it's a 100 million year old sandstone. So the ancient ocean is here. The mark of the ocean is everywhere. Rachel Carson said, could try paraphrasing, but the mark of the ocean is everywhere on this planet. But also ancient life is everywhere. And when I've traveled with Kirk Johnson all these years, we've been friends for 30 years, done countless road trips, and the fossils are the memory of the earth, that importance of life. And 99% of life is extinct. We're the 1%. We're the lucky 1% that are still here. But getting people to tune in to ancient life, I started doing these fossil maps with Kirk, and we did it first in the Cruising the Fossil Freeway book. And then we did a second book, Cruising the Fossil Coastline. Now we're working on basically an atlas that will be published but in 2025. And in that, we are populating state by state. Actually, we could be groupings of states and just showing where the fossils are found and just draw them where they're found. So, things like huge sharks from Arkansas, like what? Oh, Kansas has got some spectacular, the largest marine reptiles, to ever stalk the earth, swim in the oceans from here.
We are all affected by the ocean one way or the other. We are. Many, many ways, I guess we should say.
And we find markers of it everywhere. One of them I find actually are your murals. I was working on my Coast Guard book. I was up in Kodiak, Alaska in one February and go into their fish school. And there's one of your murals that kind of makes me smile.
I've done some big mural projects over the years and worked with other artists to create them, and got a couple in Pacific Grove. Actually, one in Pacific Grove, and there's one in Santa Cruz. There's one in Sitka, and one in Juneau, and University of Washington in Seattle, and down at the Seattle Aquarium. I've got stuff, big images. So
you're everywhere, Ray.
For now,
like the ocean,
all passing through, like the ocean, everywhere. But yeah, I'm on the T-shirts. I'm in the books,
in the bands.
You're
everywhere. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And in Kansas, so you can balance out that, that biodiversity overload you get in Alaska with.
Yeah, it's interesting to be back here. I went to school here 50 years ago, and being an old man coming back here. But Michelle and I have been on an island in the North Pacific for 42 years for me now. So just taking a break, have another place to go. But like I said, it's all connected, And
you're on the lower 48. You could drive forever.
Well, there are these things called roads and sunshine and, like fresh vegetables.
All those interesting things that you don't get a lot of in Alaska, especially.
Yeah.
Come on over to Boulder and I'll show you my ancient clams.
Well, we got to talk. You're within striking distance. Everything's within striking distance. So So yeah, and also if you find yourself here in Lindsborg, Kansas, the prairie. So Michelle and I can't help ourselves. We had a gallery in Ketchikan for 31 years. We just closed that earlier this year. We're still doing an online thing, but since we're back in my old art town of Lindsborg, we couldn't help ourselves. We opened up a little gallery, and actually Michelle's downstairs right now, and we call it the Prairie Sea.
Ooh.
Prairie Sea Gallery, Science, Art, and Mystery. It writes itself.
Oh, wow. All right. Road trip for me.
Road trip.
Off to Kansas.
So where do people, well, they can find your art. I won't even suggest it's very available. What about your music? What about your podcast?
Google my name. You'll find a bunch of stuff. You'll find my website. There's a link to the podcast. I do a podcast with David Strassman. He's actually a retired ventriloquist. That makes me the dummy in the show. But anyways, it's called Paleo Nerds. It's on all the platforms. But the music, the band name is the Ratfish Wranglers. We do have some new stuff happening. And we are on Spotify with that. And I do have to mention that my son doing a film right now, since we started going through a lot of these big changes in the last, we decided to close the gallery 2 years ago and kind of established a foothold here in Kansas. He started filming us, and he got some funding to make it actually a real documentary, and that's called Spawn Till You Die. The film he's been working on it for a couple of years, I should say, 2 years, and it's full of music. I mean, Patrick is in my band. He's got his own band, Whiskey Class, but he's in the Ratfish Wranglers. He drums with us. And that film is being worked on, and you can Google Patrick Troll and .com. Everybody's got a .com, and see a little trailer for the film. Quite fun.
All right. That sounds like something we'll put on our list to do.
On Till You Die, the book, soon to be the movie.
That's great.
It's the t-shirt, it's the book, whatever. So
amazing. Well, Ray Troll, the great artist who is known for his scientific surrealism and his band and his family and his art. Thank you so much for joining us on the Rising Tide Ocean Podcast. Rising Tide, the Ocean Podcast, is a production of Blue Frontier, co-hosted by Blue Frontier's David Helbard and Vicki Nichols Goldstein of the Inland Ocean Coalition, with production support from Holden Hardcastle of Fluid Studios, Natasha Benjamin, and Nick Paz, and editing services provided by Charles Landon of Studio Cape May. You can find Rising Tide at bluefront.org or on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcast. And don't forget to recommend the Rising Tide Ocean Podcast to your friends and other ocean lovers.
Off in the salty ocean, off where the waves roll free. The sparkling water rises, then crashes to the sea. Out amongst the breakers, you'll have no need to fear. It's true, it's the Blue Frontier. Off in the salty ocean, off to the Blue Frontier.
Sparky, come here, buddy. Sparky! There you are. Good boy, Sparky.